So, hello, everyone. Thanks a lot for joining us. This is Steve Taylor, the lead advisor over here at Merited Wealth, and you're joining us for another exciting episode of the Do It For Yourself podcast. This is your first time. Welcome. If you've listened to other podcasts of ours, we really appreciate it. As always, I like to throw out there if you have any ideas or you'd like to be a guest, just reach out. That would be great. It's all about having conversations that you think other entrepreneurs, small business owners, like yourself might benefit from. And today is I'm really excited about this conversation. We have a very seasoned, very successful entrepreneur to talk about a lot of different things, right? We were talking before this, we go a lot of different ways, but I think I know the way I want to take this. But my guest is David G. Ewing. And David, if you can, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thanks, Stephen. It's great to be here. And yeah, I am a lifelong entrepreneur. I started my first company when I was 24, and I've had a series of different companies. The main one that I've kept the longest is the one I have right now, which is Motive, a company focused on customer experience. But I'll be launching a new software company soon. And I've also been the president of the Entrepreneurs Organization, Austin, Texas chapter. So lots of different hats as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. So let me start there to get your experience there and talk about a little EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization. I don't think a lot of people know about it. Tell us a little bit about that. I know you've gone through it. You've had some leadership roles there, and just your thoughts of anybody that's out there, thinking this might be a good organization for them.
Yeah, so Entrepreneurs Organization is a not so secret society. And you need to have a business that has over $1 million in revenue to qualify. But if you have a business over 250,000, you can qualify for the accelerator program that'll help you reach to $1 million. But once you join a network of 18,000 approximately entrepreneurs all around the world in 238 different cities. And what you get out of it is a place to go where you can unlock the potential that you have as an entrepreneur. So a few things that people may not realize. There are all kinds of situations that come up when you're an entrepreneur and you have very few resources to turn to. So I'm not talking about tax advice or marketing strategy. I'm talking about, hey, my head of sales embezzled $50,000. What do I do? How do I, where do I go? I feel betrayed. Who do I talk to about that? Or on the positive side, my personal bank account just hit $1 million. Who do I celebrate that with? My neighbor? You can't talk to your neighbor about that, or your best friend. Like that, all kinds of problems occur. So, Entrepreneurs Organization is about your personal things that are blocking you from being successful. It's about the family dynamics that come up as an entrepreneur and how to uncork those. And then it is a lot of the blocking and tackling around how do I run my business more successfully, grow it, scale it. Ultimately, if I want to sell it or make it a lifestyle company, who do I talk to about all those decisions? That's why Entrepreneurs Organization exists.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let me go into a little bit on that, David, because it's funny. I sat down for an episode, a meeting of EO many, many years ago. At that point, I didn't go in that direction. I knew the facilitator was a friend, but I've had a lot of personal experience. I've had podcasts on it, a lot of benefits from doing small groups, small business owners in my industry primarily, and doing masterminds, right? Where you kind of go in, you're very vulnerable, you talk about all those different things. We've met on separate occasions. I don't know if you've participated in a mastermind. Would you say EO is a mastermind, or how would you, compare and contrast it to say like a separate mastermind that you may have been involved in or others might be thinking of when they hear that term?
Yeah. So the mastermind equivalent in EO is called a forum. And what's really interesting is that it's been around for over 20 years, the entire process, and it's evolved a lot. But it came from a story where three entrepreneurs who are some of the founders of EO, including Vern Harnish, the guy who started Boston Market and a bunch of other companies, they were sitting around having dinner. It was entrepreneurs, family, they're all having fun, wine, great meal. And then the next day they departed, and one of the people at the dinner committed suicide.
Oh,
And yeah, it was like, we didn't know. Last night we were sitting there talking, everything was fine. And they realized there was no place. It turned out this guy had His business was being propped up. He was way in debt. He didn't know where to go. Someone had embezzled some money or whatever the problem was, but he couldn't talk about it anywhere. He had no safe place to talk about all of his challenges, and eventually, just lost it. And so Forum was created so that entrepreneurs have a safe, secure place to talk confidentially about the worst problems that they have, which we call the bottom 5%, as well as celebrate the best things that happen. You just can't talk to other people about, the best 5%. Everything in the middle, the ball games and barbecues, you can talk to your friends about that, right? But those things at the edges, you might not be able to talk to your spouse about that. You might not be able to talk to your best friend about that, depending on the issue. And so your mastermind, your forum is the place to go. And so when you join EO, you join a city chapter like Austin or, Denver, Chicago, whatever. Every city has one. And then they place you in a forum where it's, 6 to 8 other business owners, non-competitive. And, there's a vetting process you go through. There's an entire day of training that you go through. And we have some really unique things that make our groups interesting. Like, we never give each other advice. That is taboo. In fact, you get a $5 fine if you give somebody advice in a meeting. You instead share your stories, right? So let's say, Stephen, that you had something horrible happen to your business, right? One of your customers, your biggest customer, pulled out for reasons that weren't fair or whatever. They're threatening lawsuits and you don't know what to do and you're stressed out of your mind, right? You can go to your forum. And instead of them saying, well, let me tell you, Stephen, I know how to solve your problem. I can tell you how to get that customer back. Instead, they talk to you about their stories of how they lost customers, what they did, what it worked, what didn't work, and ultimately how they got through it. And when you hear 6 or 8 of those different stories from other people, you really start to form your own opinion. And ultimately, you're going to solve your own problems. Everybody who gets to a forum has made it that far. And so we all trust in each other that you're going to keep going. But with the stories, examples, insights, and experience shares from other people, you really start to develop a game plan for what it is you want to do. Get your head clear, get your obstacle, understood, and then you could get past it. I've been going to forum now for, gosh, I started with my forum in 2013, so it was 11 years. And the amount of times I've, sat around the table crying and dealing with something that I thought was insurmountable. Like, this is the one that's going to get me, Well, it hasn't gotten me yet, but thanks to my forum, I've gotten past personal issues, family issues, business issues, and it's been wonderful.
That's amazing, David. I really, that's really interesting. And how often, once you get to the forum, so do you start EO and it sounds like maybe you have to be there for a certain period of time before you can enter into a forum, or once you get to a forum, how often? Because like with my mastermind, it's wonderful. We go pretty darn deep, right? We get very vulnerable with our finances at first, and then the personal stuff, maybe we don't go all the way there. I have heard that, from others like you, though, in the EO forum, how that, becomes. But how often, is that meeting? Because I think that the repetition, and I always find it whenever I do get back my mastermind, I find it so beneficial. But if too much time passes, you kind of forget the value.
Yeah. So the experience that we're trying to create at Entrepreneurs Organization is we admit members 4 times a year, so once a quarter. Once you're admitted, there's a full day training on how to be a forum member that's scheduled and kind of set up for a couple weeks after you join so that you've got some time to go to it. You go to that training, assuming you show up on time. They kick you out if you don't show up on time. So there's a lot of personal accountability in EO. But you go to the full day training, and then we try to place you in a forum, in the next 60 days. So ideally, within the first quarter that you're a member, you're in a forum, and it might be a new one. It might be an existing forum that we have, and it all depends on availability. But within 90 days, you're talking to other business owners in a confidential setting, and you're dealing with your problems. And we believe that if you have a personal problem, and it could be the good old sex, drugs, and rock and roll, whatever your problem is, if it's holding you back, it's holding your business back. So yes, you could talk about your personal problems in a secure, confidential, non-judgmental way. You can talk about your family problems, or you can talk about your business problems. And typically you talk about all 3. And really that's what we deal with. And so when we do that, we got you going, and then you meet every month with your forum. And so there's a schedule. The meetings are scheduled out, years in advance. And so every month you're checking in. You don't have to present every month. Usually you present once a quarter or so, but someone else is presenting and you're sharing experiences. And I find that actually having a ringside seat to the problems that other people prepares me for ultimately the day when that problem happens for me. So it's been a library of situations that I have not had to experience that I have been able to learn from. So
Yeah, that's really cool. And so, you mentioned also, I like the personal side of it, but also for the business, right? These are entrepreneurs. You're in there solving business problems, coming up with different ideas. So one of the things I like to ask about is, as to go through, maybe it's a similar, as it is with the forum, right? They're not necessarily giving you advice, they're giving you ideas, they're telling you how they would do it. Something that we started following in my mastermind that I found very beneficial in going through it was we started developing and abiding by the entrepreneurs organization system, right? It's something that's coming out a lot in my industry. I know it's a lot out there for small business, for going through that, a means to organize and discuss topics. How in EO, I don't even know if they're related or not, right? EO and EOS, maybe they're not, right? But when you're going through it and you kind of go through and you're tackling the business challenges, how does that look in EO? Does it look something like EOS, or kind of how does that work?
great point. So yes, as we pivot to EOS or Entrepreneur Operating System, technically it has nothing to do with EO. Just a similar acronym. Though here's the part that muddies the waters. Gino Wickman, the founder and inventor of EOS, was a member of EO. He was a member of EO Detroit. So there is a little bit of a tie there, but the two are not actually affiliated in any way. That being said, I will tell you, it is the most popular framework that entrepreneurs in EO have adopted for running their business, right? So EOS, the Entrepreneur Operating System, is a methodology, and it dictates everything, right? It dictates how you organize the company, where you have a visionary, kind of person, and there's a personality profile for that. I play the visionary at Motive. You have somebody called the integrator, which is like the chief operating officer, who's like the get it done, connect the dots, make everything happen kind of person. And they prescribed what the roles are for what the visionary job is, what the integrator job is, and you can adopt those. It's hilarious how many companies the entrepreneur goes, oh yeah, I totally identify with one of those two roles, and then they realize the gap that they don't have the other half of that, right? So they go out and close that gap. But then how you meet once a week, and what the format of that structure is, how you set goals for the quarter, how you put together your one-page summary of what your business's vision is, and your game plan, how you meet every annually. Those are all things that are in the book. It's great. It is probably a 200-page book that describes how to do it. And there are wonderful people who implement EOS, who are usually, the profile is someone who's had 3 or 4 successful businesses, and they have now adopted EOS, and they can come in and they can show you how to do all the things that you need to do, get your business set up, or you can self-implement, which is what I did in 2019. So 2019, we heard about EOS, and we opened up the book, and myself and my chief operating officer, our head of sales, we all sat down and we're like, okay, we can do this. And we implemented it in a couple of days and got started, and kind of, by trial and error, got ourselves implemented. So we're now 5 years into it, and it's been a game changer for Motive. We have made the Inc. 5000 as a result of having implemented EOS and following its structure to help bring chaos or order to the chaos of running a small company, and it's been really helpful.
Yeah, what would you say that's I think that's what a lot of people have found, that it gives a structure, it makes it a simple structure, it drives it, drive it down to one page, and then when you're setting goals, it's funny when you're out there talking with someone and you say, oh, my rock for this quarter, right? Oh, you're EOS as well, right? It's like setting the goals 10, 5, 1, 3 years, and making that very clear. What would you say has been, the biggest part of it that, in your work and job with Motive, that has led to this growth? What kind of feature has that? Has it been the structure of it? Has it been teaching you how to have conversations or different things? What have you found kind of, the most beneficial for you and Motive?
The most important thing in general, and it solves this kind of the minute you implement it, is it brings clarity, right? So I akin it to, if you've ever been diving in a muddy lake, you can't see anything, right? But if you go, to the Bahamas and you're diving in crystal clear water, you can see everything. it's kind of what it does to your business. It goes from muddy lake business to crystal clear Bahamas water business. The sharks are still there, right? The barracudas are still there. You just couldn't see them, and you can swim away from them. So that's the first thing. But the deeper thing that you get over time is there's a format that they have called IDS, which is issue, discussion, solution. And it is a method for bringing up the problems that you have in the business with the executive team around the table, and then making sure everybody can have it out in a real and a genuine, but not a destructive way, so that you can have the fight that you need to have where everybody can share their opinions. And then you can keep going until you get to the root of the problem and then solve the dang thing once and for all. And IDS has been something that we've spent a lot of time crafting at Motive, and that's been a game changer for us.
Yeah, I wonder, a lot of people, ideas, issues, discuss, solve, and to go through that. I think just most people, any kind of relationship, personal or business, right? Many times they don't have that kind of communication and the transparency that they need, and it leads to unintended consequences. So as you were going through this, right, and you said you've really nailed it down, you've worked on it. Your IDS, what it looks like today versus what it looked like to start. What were some of the challenges you had to start, or maybe some stories or whatever those might be, and how you kind of worked through those, and how that's, you say you fine-tuned it so well at this point?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that we've done at Motive that I think are, additions to what is in the core book about IDS. So IDS, the first thing is you have to identify the issue, right? So one of the things that we did is we went through some extra supplementary training from a book called Crucial Conversations, which came out about 10 years ago. It used to be called Fierce Conversations. But the takeaway from there, if you don't want to read the whole book, is they talk about this idea of if the world was a beach ball and I was standing on one stripe of it, right? I might look around at the world and be like, the whole world's yellow because I'm standing on the yellow stripe of the beach ball. And somebody else on a different stripe would look around and be like, no, the whole world is blue or red or whatever. And the point is that we're all correct because we're all standing on our different stripe of the beach ball. Well, guess what? When you are the head of sales or the head of service or the head of finance or the head of HR or the chief operating officer, guess what? You're standing on a different stripe of the beach ball. And when it comes to solving a problem that is kind of across the company, that's a big thorny hairball of an issue, everybody's got a different perspective on it. And so when we do issue raising, one of the things that we do is we make sure that everybody weighs in on the issue. Even if the issue is, hey, sales are not going to hit target this quarter. Head of HR, what do you have to say about that? Well, surprisingly enough, the head of HR actually has a lot to say about what's going on with why sales aren't coming in, because they can see the people and they bring a whole different perspective to the problem that might not have to do with our sales process or our lead gen methods or demand gen or, SEO or whatever the problem is. And you get a different perspective. So making sure that we go through every stripe of the beach ball during the issue process and we get really, really blunt about what needs to happen there is great. And then as soon as somebody wants to start arguing, we have trained ourselves that instead of starting an argument, the way that you really kind of get the fight going in a positive way is by asking a question. And so our discussions as we go into the second phase, after we've identified the issue, is everybody needs to start asking questions before we start diving in, right? So the questions get raised. And so you can start to see the arguments form, right? As some people start putting in some loaded questions. So we, do a little massaging there as we do that. And we start to laugh a little bit, but the questions come in and then we start hammering through the questions. And so once that part comes up, the funny thing is we'll probably spend, if we have 55 minutes to go through an IDS on an issue, we'll probably spend 30 of those minutes on just the issue identification, gathering the information, getting all of the stripes of the beach ball, going round and round until we've exhausted everything that is really, truly part of the problem. And then when we get to discussion questions, of the 55 minutes, that's the next 20 to 25. So we're left with like 5 to 10 minutes left. The funny thing is the solution is almost always crazy obvious, even though at the very beginning, it was like not clear at all where the problem was or what was going on or how to solve it. At the end, we're all kind of like, we're spent, but we're all like, yeah, it's clear after looking at all the stripes and, going through all the debates, shaking this out. There's like 4 key moves we can make. If we make these 4 key moves, we solve the problem. And that kind of leaves the team in this state of satisfaction because everybody got heard, everybody got to duke it out, but nobody's feelings at the end of it. There's not any resentment There was never any, it was never personal, and as a result, uh, the dust settles and the team joins hands and we've got the issue settled, and that's been awesome. And I think that's been a lot of fun for us.
Yeah, I love how you put that. I think any difficult conversation, really the best way to approach it is just approach it through asking questions, right? Whatever they might be, because that really takes people off guard. They're not just going to kind of battle up. Oh, I don't disagree. I disagree with you, right? Well, I didn't say anything, right? I'm just asking you questions to go through that process to get people there, to where they need to be and open up to be able to talk about those things and solve those organizational issues, right? And I think that's wonderful how you guys have built upon that. So, David, let me ask you this, right? It seems like you've had so many businesses you've worked on. You work with other business owners, and you grow your own, right? That you said you started your first business in 2013, right? And as you've gone through this and as you've learned so much, if you could go back to David G. Ewing of 11 years ago, right, starting his own business, and you wish there was something that you knew then that you knew now that you can go back and tell yourself, right? Hey, David, younger David, don't worry, this is all going to work out, and that really you would attribute as been one of the main drivers, or maybe if not, to the success now and motive. What would you go, tell yourself?
Stephen, that's a great question. And, my hesitation in answering it is only because there's like a long, long list of, the technical ins and outs of leadership or operating a company or marketing or sales or fulfillment or customer service or issue resolution. There's like that list goes on and on. So instead of doing all of those things, I will say this. The most powerful thing that happened to me happened about 2 years ago. And I was in Florida. Actually, funny enough, I was with a friend of mine in Miami, and we were at an EOS or an EO meeting, sorry, in South Florida. And the speaker was this woman, Molly Bloom. Have you ever heard of Molly Bloom?
Remind me, it sounds familiar.
So there was a big movie that came out called Molly's Game, and it was about how this woman
Yes.
who is like an Olympic skier winds up going to, she breaks her back. Her Olympic dreams are shattered. So she goes to, this is a true story. She goes to LA and she starts running one of the highest stakes poker games in the world. And it's ultimately illegal. And she runs it in New York, and she's running the biggest games ever. And then of course the FBI crashes down and away she goes. So she wound up making a movie after she got out of prison. And so she was the guest speaker. And one of the interesting things is I asked her, I said, hey, you broke your back when you were an Olympic skier, and then you tried to come back afterwards. What was that like? I mean, to have slipped, fallen, and broken your back, how do you actually get back in your skis and get that going? Even try that, at all, which she made a really great try before she gave it up. And her dad was a psychologist and her coach, and is a big factor in her life and in the movie, if you ever watched it. And she said, I went to my dad and I said, hey, Dad, I've got this voice in my head, and it's telling me you're going to do it again. You're going to slip again. The ski's going to come loose. You're going to break your back again, all this stuff. What do I do? And she said, then this is the key part, right? She said, hey, listen, there's nothing wrong with having a voice in your head that's telling you all those negative things, as long as you talk back to it. And that, for me, I don't know why, maybe it's the time of the day or the year or where I was in my life, but I realized that I have a negative voice that's like, the marketing campaign didn't go as well. The brand doesn't look as sharp as it needs to. That speech, you didn't nail it the way you needed to. It's always critical of me. It's always on my case, right? And what I realized was I was letting that voice destroy my joy of the journey, right? Because at the end of the day, look, sometimes you're going to start a business and it's going to be successful, and sometimes you're going to end up in a ditch. And, it's kind of a fun adventure because you're going to be okay. But what can really rob you of the joy along the way is that nagging, nasty voice that's there. So it's still there for me. It's there every day, but I, believe it or not, sounds crazy, I talk back to it. So, hey, you didn't get up and work out this morning. Yeah, well, guess what? I worked out yesterday and I was just fine, and I can work out tonight. And hey, that brand promise that you said that you were going to deliver, you didn't get there. Yeah, but you know what? It's 15% better than it was last quarter. And we're on our way to making it better this quarter. And I know what the moves are to make that brand promise happen. You can keep doing. And that has brought back the joy for me that I didn't have. So yes, if I could go back in time, if I could go back to the beginning and say, hey, you are going to be terrified out of your mind as you start this company and as you move forward. But you know what? Let that voice wash over you that's telling you about how you can't do it, how you won't do it, how you're going to fail, how you're going to embarrass yourself, how you're going to bounce checks. I've done all those things. But guess what? Talk back to that voice and tell it about all the good things that you're having. And you realize that you're doing a lot better than you thought, because this is a lonely job, and no one else can defend you from that voice but you. So go ahead and defend yourself.
I love it, David, and no one else hears it, right? And we all have those voices, right? I think everyone that's driven and works hard, we all have those voices, right? And I will also say that I've experienced, I mean, I love your answer. I've experienced, and you maybe have seen, the more successful you become, the louder that voice comes, right? They want you to listen, to it. They want you to focus on that, right? Whatever that subconscious thing of it. But I love this. I mean, I try to be aware of it, right? But I like that idea. Just talk back to it, give it whatever that garbage thought that it came in, just give it right back so you don't know what you're talking about. I love that piece of advice. So David, listen, I really appreciate the time here. We put some information about you and motive in the notes here and everything like that, but I really appreciate your time. I think this has been great, really, really helpful for anybody out there, to go back EO, EOS, whatever it might be, but to create this framework, right, to have other entrepreneurs around you to help you on that journey. And then lastly, as we said here, don't let that voice bring you down. Talk back to it. You can get through it, and you will.
Thanks, Stephen. It's been a real pleasure. And yeah, anybody who wants to hear more about what I have to, my thoughts and ideas, I'm at davidgewing.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn, David G. Ewing. And I love hearing from people and hearing their ideas and stories. So don't hesitate to reach out.
Awesome.